Hello, friends. Today I'm going to talk a little bit more about the year after my awakening experience and try to convey what it was like on a daily basis to process all these new experiences and reorient and relearn myself in a beautiful, although sometimes confusing way. So after the experience occurred, I mentioned in other podcasts that the main thing that started happening habitually, as if it wasn't in my control, was that every morning at 3:30 on the dot, I would wake wide. I'd be wide awake. I'd wake right up, and you know, it didn't feel like one of those things where you wake up in the middle of the night and then you're going to go back to sleep, and therefore it was an annoyance. This was time to get up, time for the day to start. And it didn't really matter if I went to bed 3 hours before that or 8 hours before that. That was the time of day that my body was going to be awake and was filled with this palpable electricity. Not overwhelming, but definitely present in the body. I mentioned in other talks that it wasn't that I had a desire to meditate. It wasn't that I had signed up for some plan, commitment, to change my life, and therefore I would get up early and meditate. It was that the meditation was happening to me through me, meaning that the meditation was going to happen whether I wanted it to or not. And if I was going to resist going through with the meditation, that would have been a very painful experience. Not it would just been uncomfortable in my body, not to meditate. Not because of guilt or shame, it was more of an energetic thing. And it's still very much that way today. If I am off cycle, it's primarily an energetic thing. There's no guilt, there's no shame, there's no obligation, there's no commitment in that sense. It's just happens. It's everything has a balance, and if the energy shifts, then you can feel that incongruency. And so that's the way I would describe it. So I'd wake up first thing and fall straight out of bed, no looking at anything else, just literally roll. Actually, for many times I was actually meditating sitting up in my bed. So I'd wake up and literally just go straight into meditation. And at that time, I was using a program of binaural beats for an hour of meditation, and then I would continue on after that. And I was just experimenting at that time with various ways to work with my brain waves and work with my states of consciousness. And these meditations would go on for, like I said, 1 to 3 hours, depending on the day. Most often, an hour and a half to 2 hours. And still during that period of time, I would say it probably took my body a good 6 months to start to become flexible and pliable and able to enjoy, I would say, long periods of sitting. That started to become the norm and started to become comfortable. Before that period of time, it was very difficult on my joints. It was very difficult, particularly on my hips and my knees. And I would try different ways of sitting. There was a period of time when I tried and aspired to get into full lotus, and I had to honor my body. That was not. I still don't have the ability to sit in full lotus, although I haven't worked with that in quite some time. So I was just finding what was my natural style, what was comfortable, and what was comfortable was just to sit in half lotus. And the nature of the meditation has always remained the same. It's the same now. And the only way I can describe my experience with it is whenever I close my eyes, I'm in this palpable field of energy that I identify with and express as love. And to me, that is a undeniably palpable field of energy. It's not imaginary. I don't try to create something in my head. It's incredibly physically tangible in and around my body. And when I'm there, it's an infinite field of that energy. So I'm not trying to do anything. I'm not trying to create anything. I'm not trying to let go of anything. It's just once I'm in that energy field, it's very quiet and very still. And yes, I have thoughts, but the thoughts that I have are not random, generally speaking. They are thoughts that are conscious. And for me, there's a really beautifully blurry boundary between, prayer and meditation. So the thoughts and words and people that come into my mind when I'm in that state of love, it's intentional. Therefore, I invite it in, and I receive it, or I offer something to it. And so that is still my process today. But in the beginning, I wouldn't say that in the beginning stage. It was identification through experiences that happened over a period of years thereafter, that I would be able to have a deeper relationship with this field of energy that I came to understand and know as unconditional love. So in the beginning, it was just this immensely powerful energy field, and it was not identifiable to a path or a lineage or a practice. There's no reason for it. That's what they call grace. Grace, and I didn't know this at the time, but the concept of grace is that you don't earn it. It comes to you whether you're good or you're bad. It's something that's just a factor of the universe. Grace is not necessarily earned, and it gives you these openings in your experience. And so I would say that that field of love was initiated through grace. And so I would have these meditative experiences, and as I've also mentioned before, when I would come out of them, I would come out very slowly. I would almost always have, it was like water running out of my eyes. Maybe it was tears. It didn't always feel emotional, but like palpably, I always had water running down my face, from my eyes. Maybe those are tears. I don't know. But, and then I would also feel deep changes in my body, particularly my brain. And that was just my experience of my body recalibrating to something new and different. And it was a continual process. So that wasn't a one day thing. That was day after day after day. So when I would come out of those meditations, it would be very slow, methodical, tedious process, especially with my hips and my legs. I would have to really move very slowly, and honestly, many days it was painful because my body still couldn't withstand sitting. When I was in the meditation, I really wasn't conscious of a lot of that sensation, and it was only after I was coming out that I'd have to work with my feet and my legs and my hips. So I'd come out of that, and now the vocabulary I would use would be prana or shakti. I had a lot of energy pulsing through my body. So oftentimes after that meditation, I would just have to lay out on the bed, and it was different every day. Sometimes I needed to lay there for an hour. Sometimes it was 10 minutes. Sometimes I didn't need to. But oftentimes there was this energy pulsing through my body, and I had to kind of allow it time to integrate. I couldn't just jump up and, go eat breakfast or, jump on a phone call, something like that. Luckily, you can kind of do the math. If I was starting this around 3:30, 4 a.m., let's call it on average 2 hours. So that's around 6:30, and then I'm integrating at 7:30. So I was still kind of on a daily schedule where by the time other people were getting up, I'd been through this process and this experience on a daily basis. And at that time, I would say for the first 3-4 months in particular, I was eating very little, not because it was conscious. I just didn't feel like my body needed anything than the most very raw, basic intake. So for breakfast, I would eat a handful of blueberries, organic blueberries, and I would drink hot water with lemon at the time. And, that would be my breakfast. And as I mentioned, at that time I was vegetarian. I was vegetarian for the first year and a half or so. So my food was increasingly basic, and it was smaller amounts. Again, I wasn't fasting. I didn't have needs as much. I didn't have as much desire to consume things. And that, I guess, was all encompassing. So it was food, it was media, it was social interactions. So I went very inward. Primarily, there was no conscious, like I'm pushing away, there's no resistance. It was just a natural, everything I need, I have right here in this moment. So I didn't need to habitually do the things I had been doing because I felt like I needed to, seek them elsewhere. And so the way that I started to experience life at that time was I would have these meditative experiences. And since that was kind of starting to go into early spring, because again, this experience happened the week before Christmas. So I was sort of meditating very inward. Of course, the months of January and February for most people are inward anyway. And I believe it was around March that I knew about the practice of sun gazing. I was doing a ton of research online of lots of spiritual practices, which I'm going to talk about today. I didn't have any particular lineage or path or community at that time. So, the internet was, for better and for worse, it was my cornucopia of spiritual material and teachers and resources. So one of the things that I come across was the practice of sun gazing. And I was also, and still do, only spend time and do things that I feel naturally drawn to. So again, because living in the heart is a somatic wisdom experience, I would read something and then either it would very clearly, and still this is the case, either it very clearly reverberates and it feels like a definite yes. And if it's not that, then it's not for me. And I think one of the biggest things on the spiritual path is sitting in that comfort of your own truth, because it is not a path that's given to you, it's a path that's discerned. The truth is discovered through you. It's not given to you. And there are many relative truths, and there are some absolute truths out there. And in the sea of relative truths, your exercise and your duty to yourself for truth is to find that discernment, that way to know. And for me, after that time, after that experience, it was very clear. And like I said, for better or for worse, I couldn't pretend anymore that some things were meant for me if I knew in fact they weren't. In the past, I could kind of do the dance and, things would influence you in certain ways. This was very clear. And so the practice of sun gazing, when I came across it, I knew right away. In my heart, it was like a solid yes. It's like my heart was like leaping up, like, yes, that is, you have a deep relationship with the sun in so many ways. And so the practice of sun gazing is something I started to incorporate in March. And if you look on your weather app, there's a UV index, and you can sort of see, you probably never paid attention. It's for the Weather Channel app. It's the bottom right-hand corner. And if that's ever a 0 or a 1, that means it's very low UV. So you only do sun gazing early in the morning as it's starting to rise, or at dusk when it's, about to go below the horizon for sunset. And so I incorporated that practice, and you start with small amounts of time, and you're allowing the energy of the sun to pass directly through your ocular glands into your pineal gland and pass through your body back into the earth. So you only do it on bare earth, not even grass, like actual earth, dirt. And that was incredibly, and is still when I do it, incredibly powerful for me as a practice. You can really start to get to your source, and you can really start to feel your embracing and resistance to everything that you are. So I don't recommend it. I'm not promoting it. I'm sharing my story. So I know a lot of people have fears around the sun, and if those are valid for you, then I honor those being valid for you. So I incorporated the practice of sun gazing in March, and eventually worked up to the maximum, which was approximately 40 minutes. You do it in like small increments of 30 seconds a day, building up, building up. So over months, I built up to that threshold where you're allowing the energy of the sun to pass directly through you into the earth for up to 40 minutes. And I found that to be incredibly helpful and incredibly healing and incredibly beneficial to the opening up, the awakening process. And then as I would do the meditation and prayers of various forms, then I would do sun gazing. And then after that, what I came to learn and experience was that as a incarnate being in a human body, that is my work to do. My work to do is to raise every day my reminder of why I'm here, what this life is about, what this life has in store for me, what it's capable of, what it's possible of, beyond animalistic pursuit of just fulfilling my basic needs, going beyond that into, a spiritual, soulful experience of lessons, karmic lessons. And so that's, once you make that transition to that mindfulness and that meaningfulness of your life on a repetitive daily basis with intention, you start to experience your life as sadhana. And sadhana is your spiritual practice that you do. And that's what you do. You do spiritual practices to open up yourself to the highest possibility, to the most unbelievable miracles. And then after you've done your practice, although you're always in the mindset of being a spiritual being in a human body through mantras, through other things throughout the day, once you do your primary practice, then life is responding to you. It is filled only of your teachers and only of the opportunities through which you get to develop your soul. So many people, think about doing a morning practice because they're going to do all this stuff during the day, and they want the side effect benefits of a practice. They want to be less stressed. They want to have less anxiety. And those things are side benefits of a practice. And there's something more to this than that from sharing my experience, which is when you start to understand the oneness of the universe through a series of direct experiences, which you can do through a sadhana, once you do what you do, once you do your rituals and you do your practices and you have that symbiotic, that syncing up notion on a moment-to-moment, day-to-day basis, then again, you're then receiving. So you don't then start your day and then you're going to make things happen, you're going to do them. Whatever happens from that point forward is part of that unison. It's part of that oneness. It's not you're in the oneness and then you're in the chaos and you're just trying to get through to make it through. It's once you authentically come into the oneness, it's all the oneness. It's all the oneness, everywhere, all the time, every person, every voice, every moment. It's all lessons, it's all teachers, it's all part of the one. And so your existence goes from doing practice and receiving. It goes to that. That's what becomes daily life. You're not fighting, you're not pushing, you're not resisting. So when we start to talk about the concept of surrender, it's not an idea. It's not an invitation. It is part of your practice. Because once you have done the things that you need to do to be in that concept of oneness, then the truth is, like I said in the last podcast, either all of the one is perfect or it's imperfect. If it is perfect, that's how I experience it, then everything is a benefit for your soul and everything is karma unfolding. I don't believe in reincarnation. I experience reincarnation. I've had a set of experiences. I don't ask if you believe in breathing as you're breathing. You don't ask me if I believe in reincarnation as I reincarnate. So, in the experience of reincarnation as a soul in a body, everything from that perspective is my lesson, is my teacher, is beneficial to me in some way. Doesn't mean that I like perfection. If I don't like perfection, it's opportunity to play with resistance. Doesn't mean it's imperfect. It's not sometimes perfect and sometimes imperfect. Infinity is not sometimes infinite and then sometimes it's limited. These are the absolute truths. Infinity is an absolute truth. Unconditional love is an absolute truth. So I started to receive the day. Every day, every voice, every opportunity became a teacher. And some of those opportunities were to give, and some of those opportunities were to receive, and some of those opportunities were to let go. But it was such a drastic shift, phenomenal drastic shift, to go from I must survive, I must prove something to people, I must prove my worth, I must seek everything I want and everything I need and everything that I desire. The one way I'm going to get it is I'm going to either make it happen, I'm going to seek it, I'm going to attain it, I'm going to achieve it. Whew. And by the way, since I have these like insatiable desires, that cycle of always feeling like I have to do all those things, it's never going to end. I don't need to give examples for that. We all know that, right? It's never going to end. And that's how I have been living, because that's how we're socialized. That's what we're taught, and that's what we've learned. What you learn is not the truth. What you experience directly is truth. And my learned behavior up to that point was that was true. And that was not the reality of direct experience. That was what I had been socialized to no one's fault. It's no one's fault that socialization works in the way that it does. It's all part of the perfection of awakening, to be able to see through that eventually and to respond to it with love, like everything else. So, socially, I was inward, not pushing people away. I would still hang out with people I had been hanging out with, but I had to be truthful, that something significant was going on. So I was not partaking of, alcohol or drugs or socializing in the same ways. And there was no desire to do that. And I did feel alone. But again, also as I've discussed elsewhere, crucial concept of loneliness and being alone. And it's the first time I ever felt that and knew that. So after that transition, I would say basically up until March, I was shutting down my startup, which was going to be over a year-long process. And that's how I was still receiving payments from the one client we had at the time. So I knew I was going to have to go to India to shut things down there, and I knew I was going to eventually have to be in Europe some to shut things down there properly. So February and March were really relearning my behavioral experience and reintegrating all these different energies and practices, just allowing my body to go through the process. It didn't feel like it was complete because every day I would go through this process, I still had that significant energy pulsing through my body. I could feel changes in my brain. So I had to simply be patient with that, not judge it, not rush it. And I was creating spaciousness for myself, which really I had not done previously in my life. It might be a token moment here, a token moment there. But to really create true spaciousness, this was the first time that I started to treat myself well, because I started loving myself deeply and started loving my body, started loving my capability of just being alive. It wasn't a, 30-day cleanse. It's a lifelong change to really. I had heard the statement or the phrase, your body is your temple, and that never really resonated with me before that. And then afterward, it was like, whoa, literally, like this stuff is happening through me. And the only way it's happening through me is this gift of this body, which is unfathomably powerful. Of course I want to treat it well. Of course I want to allow this process, the purest, cleanest place to take place, because I'm in awe of all the things that are happening and changing. I would say until March is when I was just going through that process. And the first spiritual group that I found was through the nonprofit I had started called belong.lgbt. And that was free peer coaching for the gay community that I had started maybe 3 years before that. So we had 120 volunteer coaches that were trained. And that gave me access to all of those people as well. One of those coaches was more overtly, outwardly, spiritually connected, and I told him that there was stuff that was going on with me and I wanted to have coffee. And in that coffee, I shared my story like I'm doing here. And he was very helpful. He's very kind, listening. And he introduced me to initially a group that is global. It's called the Oneness Blessing. And it's a practice of energy exchange that was started in India about maybe 15 years ago by two avatars, Sri Bhagavan and Sri Amma. And he invited me to this group, and I knew nothing about it. So I just, I'm very open-minded to everything, especially in that stage. And I went to this home, and there was a group of maybe 8 to 10 people. And, it's presented as meditation, which it is. And then as you're meditating, the group says a mantra called the Mula Mantra, which acknowledges the divine masculine and the divine feminine energy. And then after reciting the Mula Mantra, every person takes their hands and places them directly on the top of your head. And they are embodying this field of love inside of themselves, and they're basically physically transmitting that universal love to you, and you're receiving. And then later, people who have received go and they give it to others. And I'm not espousing that as good or bad. The reason I'm sharing that part of the story is that field of energy, again, that I don't think I would have articulated as unconditional love at that time, I suddenly realized that it was something that could be given and received amongst people, between people. And that was a huge breakthrough for me, because I had this energy and this experience, but I also felt very alone. And suddenly, in going to this particular group, I definitely didn't feel alone, because I felt like other people also held this energy. However they were experiencing it might be different than me. I can't know. But when they would say this prayer, this mantra, and place their hands on my head, that experience of that energy would be accelerated greatly. And later, when I learned how to do it in return, also the giving of that was accelerated immensely. So that was truly helpful in the respect that it just allowed me to know that that energy is universal and can be given and can be received. And so that was a very central part and powerful part of my practice in the beginning was, I do my meditation and I do some prayers. I do sun gazing in the morning. And then once a week, I would go to this group on Wednesday nights. And it was the first group of people that I got to be around. It's not a religious path per se. So people from all different backgrounds and religions around the world can be part of the oneness blessing. Again, it's more of an energetic exchange. So it's an energetic phenomenon more so than a religious phenomenon. It's not something you read about. It's a direct experience. That was so transformative for me to be able to share that and to know that these groups were all around the world. And later, I did go to India and visit their temple there, which I'll talk about. So those were my days. Those were my weeks primarily. It was reading tons, drinking lots of water, eating very basic food, and doing my practices. And then everything else was part of my practice. It was just that I was receiving and learning and surrendering, even though I wouldn't have used the word surrender then. I just knew that everything was happening for me and with me, not to me. I was part of it. That knowingness without the vocabulary of surrender. So today I'm going to stop there, and the next time I'm going to talk about the beginning of my travels, a year-long journey to Encinitas in California, and a whole series of experiences there, eventually going to India and Zambia and finding myself in Maui with Ram Dass at the end of that year. So thank you so much for your time and listening. My hope in creating all of this is that it can only be helpful in whatever way that it is received by your heart and your soul. Thank you.